Hey everybody, welcome back to On Stage, Off Stage. I'm your host, George Sapio, and this is episode number 176, April of 2024. Our guests this month are Marci J. Duncan and Kerry Sandell. They are Florida-based playwrights, actors, and producers of a hit play, Dissonance, which begs the question, can a black woman and a white woman who have been friends for 20 years have an honest, open conversation about race? That's a huge question, and this play does an amazingly powerful job of addressing the issues and risks involved. Dissonance has been performed across the United States to rave reviews and continues to tour.
How is it that you can hang out with my other friends, but I'm not invited to hang out with yours?
You don't speak two languages.
Neither do you.
Oh, I do, and I'm very fluent in both.
Since when? I have never heard you speak a language other than English.
I'm not talking about that kind of language.
What else is there?
Culture.
Marci and Kerry, welcome to On Stage, Off Stage. Thrilled to have you both here, and thank you so much for taking the time. Dissonance is a play that once I started reading about it and finding out more about it, I had to find out more about it. So let's talk about how an important piece of work like this, how a difficult, because I'm sure it must be difficult to generate and to work through, got started. Where did this come from?
Well, hello, everybody. I am Marci J. Duncan, and I was doing a show in Florida, and Kerry came to see the show. And after the show, Kerry asked if she could talk to me. And I want you to keep in mind that this was around the time of the George Floyd murder.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of civil unrest was happening, and it was a very unstable time. And when Kerry asked me, could she talk to me? I didn't know what she wanted to talk about. But when she pulled me over to the side, she said, "How are you doing?" And I immediately knew what she meant. I knew what she meant. And it was striking to me. And she said, "Hey, I'm wondering the things that you're telling your son during this time versus the things that I'm telling my son during this time. We both have sons around the same age, around 20. And I want to talk to you about that. And I also think we should write a play about it." And so I was inspired by that. I was struck by that. And I went home immediately and started kind of writing some things down that were in my mind and in my heart that just started to pour out because of that simple action that Kerry did. So quite honestly, that's how it started.
That one simple question,
Mm-hmm.
how are you doing?
How are you doing?
Is a question that a lot of white people don't get. Just to ask that one simple question could open up so much that needs to be said and so much that needs to be communicated.
It's simple, but not easy, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And, it was an interesting process because like Marci said, this was the summer 2020. And after that time, this was in the spring following that.
Mm-hmm.
And so everything was shut down. We all experienced the civil unrest in different ways.
Yeah.
And that's important to acknowledge as well. But we also were all locked down for COVID. So as Marci started writing, she and I started meeting by Zoom and created a Google Doc and started having this dialogue via Google Doc and via Zoom. And it became the world's longest Google document. It became the backbone and the skeleton for the play. But this is where we had the dialogue of asking these questions about race, trying to figure out, tell me what you're experiencing. Let me tell you how I'm seeing it. And that's the premise of the whole play is these women in the play, Angela and Lauren, have been friends for 20 years.
Yeah.
Angela's Black, Lauren's white. They've been friends since grad school. They're starting a business together, but they've become very adept at avoiding the elephants in the room and tiptoeing around certain topics or conversations that might be a little bit uncomfortable. And we all do that in relationships, right? But, you can't have an intimacy, a relationship, a friendship, if you're not being honest with who you are and showing that full part of yourself. So the play asks the question, can a white woman and a Black woman have an honest, candid conversation about race and their friendship survive?
Being honest is a very tough thing to do sometimes because the more honest you want to become, the more of a risk you're actually taking because it's revealing things or asking things that you didn't know. You may not want to know, but you should know. And it's difficult, especially with this particular subject, because it's so fraught with pitfalls and it's so fraught with emotional blind alleys that it's a very scary thing.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't know how to ask the questions in the first place.
Yeah.
Which makes it clumsy and it makes it very, very awkward.
But, I think one of the things that our play does really well, and I love that you said that, George, that it is clumsy and it is awkward and it is uncomfortable. I love that. But I also like for people to know that those things are normal to feel.
Yeah.
They are normal to feel, and they should be normalized as part of the process. One of the things that our play does is it couches this conversation in love, right? The first thing you see when you see these two women, you see that they love each other. You see how they care so much for each other. And in some instances, they care so much that they skated around these difficult conversations because they didn't want to hurt each other's feelings. They didn't want the relationship to be over. So they did. They skated around talking about the elephant in the room, the differences between these two women, the cultural differences, the life experience differences between these two women, because they were afraid of how they would be perceived by the other one. But the play also asked the question, can you allow yourself to truly be seen by the people in your life that you say you love? Because Angela, the character that I play, Marci Duncan speaking here, that character didn't think that Lauren, the other character, would see her and accept her, right? And so a part of the conversation is also, are you allowing yourself to be truly seen by the other person? And is the other person truly seeing you? So yes, embrace that uncomfortable, embrace that difficult, embrace that icky, because it's just a part of the conversation. It's just a part of it.
It is a part. It's a very risky part because you always, and this happens in the play a couple of times. The two of you come so close to the friendship ending. I was reading it and I'm thinking, oh no, don't let this happen. Come on, you guys can get through this. I was literally out loud rooting for you.
Yes.
And it's so important, like Marci said, that you recognize they're friends. They do love one another. And we talk about this a lot in our talkbacks in the plays. Dissonance is not prescriptive. It's not how to have a conversation about race, but it shows a way. And we talk in the talkback about the importance of, what's your motive, what's your agenda, and what needs to be present in the room in order to have a conversation about race with cross-race, cross-cultural people. These women they have relationships, they have trust, they have love, they have a willingness to forgive one another. They have a willingness to see one another, but it takes them a hot minute to get there, 20 years, right? And part of our process, having these conversations, because the conversations we have in the play are the conversations that Marci and I had, are, we didn't know at the time, but now we look back and see what we were doing. But, at the time we opened up that Google Doc and we're like, I'm going to screw up. The goal is unity. And then also the beauty of being able to step away from a document and going, I don't know. I got to think about, how do I really feel? Or how do I need to answer that so that I'm really being honest? So it was a beautiful, what could have been a very uncomfortable and painful process was beautiful. Now, I will say I have to give props to Marci because I asked some very intrusive questions and she so graciously really did a lot of work and did a lot of introspection and answered a lot of intrusive questions honestly. And because of her vulnerability and introspection, Dissonance was born and became this beautiful play. So she was just amazing. And the whole process was way easier than it could have been because of that and because of the safe container we have.
Well, it sounds like you have a very atypical, special relationship between the two of you to ask the hard questions and to honestly answer them, both of which, I don't know which one would be tougher than the other. To actually vocalize, bring things out from your soul into the air where it's public, even though it's just between the two of you, and acknowledge this. So.
I want to say this, George. We did this process and it was beautiful between Kerry and I, and our friendship went from 0 to 60. But when we got into the rehearsal room to workshop the piece and to really see if this piece had the legs that it needed to have for an audience, that was another level of introspection. We thought we were saying the things, but then when our director came in to really workshop this piece, Dr. James Webb, he started reading it and listening to us. And he's like, I hear what you're saying, guys, but that's not really what you're saying. Why don't you dig a little deeper? And so he challenged us even more. And I would say, George, for me, that time workshopping it and really speaking the truth of what I had never said in front of a white woman before in my life, that was difficult. That was difficult. So much so that when we got to the first performance in my hometown at my undergrad, I mean, my body went berserk because I had been holding on to these things for so long, and I had never spoken them out loud to white people or to a mass amount of people. And some of these things were absolutely true for me. Yeah. And so George, I had to go to the chiropractor. I had to go to the masseuse to release, because it was almost like my body was holding on to itself saying, don't do it. I want to protect you. Don't do it. Yeah. And at the same time, the words and the liberation that I felt doing this play with Kerry, it was absolutely saying, let go. It'll be okay. You won't hurt. Okay. Everything is going to be all right. And it absolutely was all right, but not before my body said, don't do it.
I can't even imagine the tension and probably fear first starting out between yourselves and then bringing in the director who I want to talk about and then going public with it. 3 different stages of reveal. You know, with a lot of plays, you don't go through this kind of emotional, ladder, but with the two of you, it must have been incredible. Talk to me about Dr. James Webb. How do you know him? How did he come in? And what was the process like in the rehearsal room? Because I want to talk to you about the first writing experience you've had. You're both actors and teachers, but writing's different.
Well, Dr. James Webb, and I'll let Kerry speak on him too. Dr. James Webb is a good friend of mine. We went to undergrad together and went to graduate school together. So we've been friends for a long time, and he is also a playwright. So when Kerry and I were done with a draft, we felt comfortable with our first draft. We both divided and conquered. Kerry sent it to someone she trusted, and I sent it to someone I trusted. James gave some wonderful feedback, and so did Kerry's confidant, and they were very similar. The feedback was very similar from the both of them. And so Kerry and I felt confident that we had something. And then one day, James called me out of the blue. I want to produce your play. Let's get to work.
Nice.
That was the spark. He wasn't comfortable with just letting it lie. He wanted to produce it and see it up on its feet, and he wanted to direct it. And I felt comfortable with him, and I gave the idea to Kerry. They met. And Kerry, what did you think about James when you first met him?
I love James. I'm very, very thankful for his vision because, like Marci said, he's very interested in the truth. I mean, we all should be as theater artists and playwrights and directors and producers, but
absolutely,
he's very, very adept at needling in because we were like, we got this. We have done this hard work. We're being honest. Look at us. Isn't this great? And there was still so much we were protecting that we weren't even aware of. And then he's a very also gifted director and playwright and comes from a rich musical theater background. So his visual insight into some of the elements that we just couldn't even have conceived of create this magical world that's very realistic, but has these elements that underscore the conflict or underscore, some of these intimate moments. Play has evolved and tweaked so much because of his hand on it. And, as a playwright, the process is you write something and every word is so important. And then you got to go in and start amputating, right?
Yes,
so
I'm very familiar with that.
You're like, oh, it's such a good line. But no, we don't need it. It makes it so beautiful. And James has been so integral in that shaping and molding of what it became. And then his doctorate is in educational theater. And so his paradigm is always one of how are we using this to educate? And that was kind of our vision too. And we normalized in our rehearsal process from a very early on this concept of leading in love. And so, we express that I love you, I love you, I love you with one another when we see one another. And it not only relationally, like Marci said, we all went from 0 to 60, but it created that is our platform. And so every decision we make business wise, production wise, has that underscoring it as this is where we're starting. And I have to acknowledge James's hand in that.
Cool. It sounds like you had the one person who needed to be there step in.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great, because choosing a director is always a dicey kind of thing. Will it match the playwright's vision? In this case, two playwrights' visions who are actually putting themselves on stage doing this. How much did the script change? Let's say from first draft to where you are now. And is it still evolving? Are you still making changes?
It did change. Like we mentioned, we had our draft that Kerry and I did, and then we moved to the workshop, and the workshop changed it and tightened it up a little bit. And then we changed it again once we got our first performance of it in front of an actual audience.
Right.
Seeing what technical components worked, what lines still resonated.
Mm-hmm.
And so we tightened it during that process, during that run. And then we had another run, our Pensacola premiere, and we did another round of tweaking and tightening, but it was just mainly taking out words, adding words, being more clear about this line. But I will say after that Pensacola run, let's see, our Pensacola run was in September of, what's the year, Kerry? September of?
It was 23.
2023. And we have kept pretty much the same script from September to 2023. And we've been several different performance venues from Washington to New York, Destin, Florida, Orlando, and we've pretty much kept the same script. I think it was 2022. Was it 2022?
I was going to say, I think it's 22.
I asked the question because this is the first time playwright experience for both of you. Being actors, being teachers, and some of us get a little possessive of our words on the page. Now, I'm very used to workshopping. I'm still tweaking stuff I wrote 15 years ago. But there are playwrights who don't understand that kind of system, and it becomes a possessive thing. So I was just wondering what it was like for the two of you. Did you ever get to the point where how much more of this do we need to change, or how much more of this needs to... I didn't know how much work went into this just to bring it to another level.
Yep, I did. Because the way James works is we'll read a scene together, a little section together around the table, and then we'll stand up and read it, and then we'll block it out. And if we block it out and it's not making sense, then he comes back to the table and he's like, okay, what is not working here? And sometimes we were trying to block it for our Tallahassee premiere, and it was long because we were having to go back to the script to rewrite, tweak, to be more clear. And that was frustrating. To me, it was frustrating because as you're articulating, George, I was, so particular about the words that were on the page. I wanted to make sure that what we were saying, it was still the same play. I wanted to make sure it was still the same play. And, once I was understanding that what we're doing is making the play more clear, dramaturgically speaking, and also theatrically speaking. Right. And so once I made peace with that, it was a little bit easier, and I could see us getting close to the finish line. I could see us getting close. So what about you, Kerry? What did you think?
As far as the the arc of the storyline, that all, and we didn't make any changes or decisions that had significant impact on the story, but it was constantly nipping and tucking, nipping and tucking, nipping and tucking.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I think it probably was more clear for us than maybe it would be if we were only sitting out in the house watching it, trying to figure out what's working and what's not, because the acting process and the blocking process was kind of going hand in hand with the editing constantly. So we could feel in our bodies, this isn't right. And that's a lot of times where James would say, that's because you're not being 100% honest. What would you really say? And so that was also part of the dialing in is, if it's not working in our bodies, regardless of the technical aspect of the blocking, then that's a big red flag that something's not working in the script itself. So it was a lot of mini procedures.
Sure. Yeah, no, I totally understand what you're talking about. Let's talk about the other side of the equation here. You walk out and you do this play. What was the audience reactions to this? Because this is heavy, deep, largely unspoken material for a lot of the audience. For other members of the audience, this is stuff that probably needed to be said years ago. But what did the audience come back to you with?
Well,
I got smiles from both of you on this one.
I know, because she knows what I'm going to say. Every audience we've gone to, there have been people that say, everybody needs to see this.
Yeah.
Everybody needs to see this. We also hear from people that say, I see myself up there. That's me. We hear people saying, I want to go and have a conversation with my friend now. The thing about it is the way the play is set up is you see these two women enjoying each other's company, loving on one another, finishing each other's sentences, putting together this beautiful cafe together before they ever even get into the conversation, right? And so you're invested. You are invested in the friendship and the fun and the joy, because the play is funny. It's kind of funny, especially
funny. Yes.
The way that I am and Kerry are together. It's funny. And even when we're talking about hard things, there are some zingers in there that are also funny to kind of lighten it up as well too. But the audiences love this show. And it always amazes me that there are so many people who want to have the conversation, who have hope, who want unity. It is amazing because the media, of course, tells you a different story. It tells you a different story. Yeah,
I wouldn't give you two nickels for the media.
This conversation has been a long conversation that has gone on and will continue to go on. But in the throes of 2020, everything was so politicized. And we were all stuck in our homes, living life on social media or on TV. So everything we saw was very disparate. Everything was very divisive. And we have seen through staging the show across the South and the Northeast that that's not the reality. Most of us do want unity. Like Marci said, we premiered this in Florida at FAMU, which is an HBCU. So it was a predominantly Black audience. And then right after that, we brought it to Pensacola, and several of those shows were predominantly white. And so it was curious to me to see, okay, how's this going to go? Because, one demographic, what they're seeing is a validation and their experience being articulated. So for what really convinced me that, we knew it had a good show. We knew it was good. But once we came back up to the panhandle of Florida in this area, and there were, I can think of one show where there was a middle-aged man that I knew grew up in a somewhat rural area of Florida up here in the Panhandle, which has its own history. And after the show, he came to us and he said, I've got a lot of thinking to do. And to me, that was just like the heavens opened up and the angels started singing, because it's like, that's exactly, we all have something to learn. We all have an opportunity to be willing to see and to reassess. Do my beliefs and values align with reality? And do I need to reassess that? And so we've performed it across, and we've performed it across Florida, across the Panhandle. We've taken it to Central Florida, to Ocala and Sanford. We did 2 weeks in DC, and we took it to the Bronx. And this past weekend we were in Mississippi. regardless of those very different demographics and geolocations, the response, like Marci said, has been embracing and validating, and I see me there, or I didn't know what to do during that time either. And so everybody has received it. We've not had any negative response at all. You see, oh my goodness, this is the play. They're going to talk about race, put on your seatbelt. But it's really a lovely, lovely experience. And yes, it's hard sometimes. And yes, it's messy sometimes, but it's fun and lovely and beautiful. And with the goal being unity, it's something that the audiences invest in.
Yeah, because I can easily see this challenging some white people's status quo. The things that they're holding inside, the thoughts that they don't know how to express, or the things they've grown up with. And then all of a sudden this conversation comes out, and I can see it just opening up a whole new raft of emotions and concepts that now you've been exposed to this.
Yeah.
Now it's going to be in your brain. You're going to have to think about this, and how they deal with that, regardless of what their original stance on this issue is, has to be powerful.
My family came to see it when we were in Gainesville, and my nieces and nephews came, and they're young folk. And we went out to dinner afterwards, and my nephew said, Auntie, I really wanted to root for you, and you made some good points. She made some good points too, Auntie. And that's the thing, nobody is a villain here. We both come to the table with our biases, and we have to put them out there for each other to see, right? And Angela has just as much work to do as Lauren's character has. And, my Black friends have come and gone and said, wow, that challenged me.
That's why it's so important that this conversation is to women, to moms, to friends. It's not, the Black representative and the white representative talking about race, So when you see it as an audience member, it's relational. This is a human issue. This is not a political issue. This is not this is the human experience. And that's what we do as theater artists, hopefully.
As I was reading this, my mind jumped all over, because it was definitely jumping all over because of the conversation that was being had between these two particular persons. And I'm wondering, what would this conversation be like if these were men?
You know what? Just recently, George, people have started asking us that. Like, I think maybe 3 times we have gotten that question.
Yeah.
3 times. And I'm like, wow, that's interesting. It would be a different play.
I think it would. But it's not. It is right where it should be, I think. And I think maybe that other play needs to come later. Maybe somebody who sees this is going to say, okay, maybe we can explore this a little differently, because coming through a male point of view here, with all the baggage that entails, there were places in this play that just made me stop. And I had to put it down a couple of times just to think about what was written and what was said on stage. At one point, Angela says, we don't do this. We don't have these conversations. And that was so true. It's such a simple thing to say, but to bring it out in front of a captive audience is one step along the way. And then you come up with, there's a lot of work trying to be done on both sides. Again, that leads us closer to more of what's at the crux of this. And there are 2 more quotes I just want to throw at you, and I'd love to talk about these. One point, Angela says, it feels like I'm running on one of those hamster wheels, and I'm running, and I can't get off. I feel like I'm always fighting to let myself feel special, fighting to hold on to myself, always fighting. I don't know how to stop. And I got to the end of that paragraph, and I was like, oh, man.
Yeah.
Just to say that out loud, and then to look at the person who is saying it and realize this is the truth. You don't think about this. You've never seen this before. You've never heard this, but this is the situation this woman is in.
George, you hit it, the nail on the head.
You wrote this. I just read it.
But what I wanted to communicate, it is true, and it's my true feeling.
Yeah.
You got it exactly. Every single night, especially the first couple of times we did this show, I wept at that point.
Yeah.
I wept. And I hear other women weeping at that monologue because they also feel that, right? And the fact that you pull that out, it makes me know that honesty doesn't just put yourself out there, but it also touches other people. And that makes it worth it to me. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, that blows my mind.
It's a short paragraph, but it says so much about so many people. And once you take what that one person is feeling and extrapolate it to all the rest of the people who are feeling like that, you've got a tidal wave of emotional power.
And it's so revealing about the character as well. That is her towards the end of the play, but it's that moment where she's finally acknowledging and willing to say, okay, I'm going to let my shield down a little bit. This is what my problem is. Trust is my problem. Yeah. And, her experience, we've already talked about where she's coming from. And as a single mom and as someone in grad school and a professor and everything else, she's had to keep it all together. She's had to be fighting. And then you've got Lauren's character who's just figuring out, how do I do any of this on my own? And she's not ever had to experience that. I'm hanging on, I'm driving, I'm making the decisions, I'm fighting. And I got to keep it together. And so for Angela to say that to Lauren is a big piece of that, what we've just talked about, of that, okay, I'm going to show you where I'm coming from. This is really what's going on. Yeah. So it's a beautiful, beautiful moment. I love that monologue.
And then I got hit with something else, which was very, very simple, but it was also very illuminating. Angela says, "You don't speak two languages." And Laura says, "Neither do you." And Angela says, "Oh, I do. And I'm very fluent in both." And I thought, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And Lauren kind of blows it off.
Yeah, yeah, but it's so
she doesn't get it initially.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. The language difference between African Americans and white people is huge. We use the same words, we speak the same language, English, roughly in some cases. The language is completely different.
Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of that is, and what one of my takeaways and lessons throughout this journey has been, is the appreciation and celebration of culture. Yeah. In white American culture, we don't have an identity because we are the dominant culture. Yeah. I think it's very easy for us to not appreciate and acknowledge how integral that is into a person's experience, but B, who they are. And to celebrate that and honor it. And so that moment is, Lauren doesn't quite get it when she's, when she's talking about culture and speaking two different languages. Her paradigm is, I'm your friend, you're my friend, we work together, we've always been friends, we have the same culture. And it's completely bisecting a part of who Angela is. And that's a big part of who she is. And that's what they've been missing so much, is that celebration of that, Angela being willing to show her that piece of her. Because Lauren says at one point, or Angela says, something about, I'm afraid that I can't show you my full self. And Lauren says, why? And she's like, I don't want to hurt you. And I don't need you to protect me. I need you to be honest with me. I need you to tell me the truth. Show me who you are. And that is all wrapped up in that.
This play is an absolute powerhouse, and I'm going to echo what many other people have said, and that's everybody should see this. It's a revelatory experience. Kerry, Sandell, and Marci, J. Duncan, this has been a beautiful, wonderful experience, and I thank you so much for being on the show and talking about this amazing play, Dissonance. Let our audience know where they can find out more about the play, especially where it's going to be produced, and more about yourselves as artists.
All right. So you guys can follow us on our social media. We are Dissonance, the play, on Instagram and Facebook. And our website is dissonanceplay.com. And our website is like our personal agenda. It'll tell you everywhere we're going, where we'll be next, where we just come from, what the people are saying, what the play is about. And it talks about the actors as well, Kerry and myself, and our director as well. Our Instagram, you can always follow me on Marci J. Duncan on Instagram and Facebook, Kerry Sandell on Instagram and Facebook. And also I have a website that keeps up with other things that I'm doing, Artists at Play, workshops.com. And that's where I log my other pursuits that I'm doing as well.
Fantastic. Kerry, anything to add?
Oh, nothing to add. I'm actually going to be developing a personal website here shortly because I'm adding to some of my writing projects. So,
good. More writing in the future for the two of you. I hope so. Yay.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey kids, thanks for listening to On Stage, Off Stage. On Stage, Off Stage is produced monthly, and all of our shows can be found at onstageoffstage.org and also on Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart, and Google Podcasts. If you enjoy what we do, please recommend us to your friends. Don't forget to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at OnOffStage. And if you are a theater artist with an upcoming project or interest, or know of someone in the theater world who'd make good chat, by all means, send us a note at onstageoffstagepodcast@gmail.com. Our theme music is Don't Worry, Be Frappy by the composer Max Dickinson. You can find a lot more of Max's magnificent music on SoundCloud. I'm George Sapio. Thanks once again for listening, and please be kind to those with whom we share this rock. And as always, happy theatering to all of you.